Hello and welcome back. In this video, I'm going to take you through some basic charting tasks in Zoom data, particularly sorting, limiting, the metric and attribute pickers, and the time bar. Let's get started. So what we're going to do is jump into a Zoom data instance, and yours will probably look a lot like this. If you haven't added any charts here, you will have this wonderful call out that'll let you know to add your first chart here. That's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to hit this big blue New button, select Charts and Dashboards, and then we're going to use the FAA flight delay CSV file that we uploaded in the video creating a CSV data source. So clicking that, we can choose what chart we want to start with, and why not start with a bar chart? Fantastic. So here, what we're looking at is a bar chart of number of flights grouped by origin airport. So flights coming out of LAX, O'Hare, Dallas-Fort Worth, Atlanta, and International Airport Dulles. Now, let's kind of take a look at this interface and the interface elements. Up here we have the title, some buttons, some further information about the chart. On the left, we have what's called the left rail, and it's got a bunch of different buttons that will come in very handy. We'll, in time, go through each of these buttons and their functionality. On the chart itself, we have these highlighted buttons. These are our metric and attribute pickers. The attribute picker will highlight yellow, while the metric picker will highlight blue. And then at the bottom, we have what's called the time bar. And that will allow us to change the time span that our data's covering. Now, if we look at these green wings here, we can see that the time span that's currently being selected is January 1st, 2015 to December 31st, 2015. And that's fine for our purposes. So let's try changing this data, the data backing this chart. Our group is origin airport right now, and that's fine. But let's change our metric to average departure delay so that we can see which airports have the highest delay in their departures. So we click departure delay, and then we can choose average. Now, average was selected by default in this case, so we didn't have to do that. We set that up when we set up the source. But if you haven't set that up in the source, some would be the default, and you'd have to go in and manually change it to average, which is fine. Now, looking back at the chart, we see that it's updated. We can see that O'Hare has the longest average delay at about 16 minutes, whereas it looks like LAX has the shortest at just under 10 minutes. Now, one thing that's a little bit frustrating about this chart now is that the bars aren't neatly sorted from greatest to least anymore. And you might be wondering why. And that's because if we enter the sort and limit pane here on the left, you'll see that the sort by is still set to number of flights from before. Because when you change the metric that's driving these bars, it doesn't change the metric that's being used to sort the bars. This is intentional, and it's really helpful because sometimes you might want to look at bars in the order of, let's say, most popular airports, but you want the bar heights to be, for example, number of complaints. So like if you see a really tall bar on the right side of the screen, you know that airport has a lot of complaints, but it's not that popular. So it affects fewer people. And vice versa. On the left, you can be like, oh, that's a very popular airport. Clearly, that should be prioritized. So that can be useful. But in this scenario, what we want to do is order the bars so that they're sorted in descending order of average departure delay. So we hit departure delay, make sure our aggregation set to average, descending, and apply. And wonderful. That did exactly what we wanted it to. Now the bars are sorted. Now, one thing that you might notice also is that the bar colors are a little weird. And that's because bar color is a separate metric from bar height, and it's still set to number of flights. If we set it to average departure delay, you'll notice that now it correlates with the heights of the bars again. Cool. One other thing that is important to cover is while we were looking at the sort panel here, you may have noticed this limit here. Limit limits the number of chart elements that are shown. In this case, it's 50, so this chart won't display more than 50 bars. If this were a line chart, it would be 50 points on a line. Limit can be really useful for preventing really complicated charts from slowing down older computers. And it can be especially useful used in combination with the sort to create top-end style charts. So for example, we have 5 airports here. But if we wanted a bar chart that showed top 3, we could reduce the limit to 3. And now we have the top 3 airports in terms of departure delay. And then let's change that back to 50. This can be really useful if you want to show the top contributors to some cause, but you don't want to display every bar in the graph. Fantastic. Now let's try a different type of chart. So what I'm going to do is go back home. It'll ask to save. I'm not going to save this chart. And instead, I'm going to create a new chart using that same CSV source. This time, we're going to use line trend attribute values, which is the basic line chart type. And what we're going to look at is exactly what we looked at before. The group's going to be origin airport, and the y-axis is going to be not number of flights, but average departure delay. Great. Now, you're looking at this, and you might say, this is pretty messy. What's going on? What's going on is, remember that time granularity picker we went over in the previous video? Well, that picker over here is set to day. And so it's plotting a point for every single day in the year 2015, which shows a lot of data, but it makes it really hard for us to analyze this. What we might want to look at instead is 12 points for each line, 1 for each month. So to do that, we're going to zoom out from day to week and from week to month. Fantastic. So now what we're looking at is for each airport, the average departure delay per month for the year 2015. You're going to see this really interesting annual trend where delays peak in the summer months and generally fall all across the board in September and October, maybe because people go back to school, rise slowly again over the winter, and peak again in the spring. So there's clearly a seasonal dependence for aircraft delays, regardless of these airports. They all kind of follow that curve, some more extremely than others, though. Naturally, there are a wide range of other charts you can explore. For example, we have pie charts, donut charts, tables. But right now, we're going to stop this demo, go to a little refresher on sorts and limits, and then in the next video, we're going to try and build a couple use cases around different hypothetical scenarios so that instead of going through each of these chart types, you can understand how you can use the different chart types to get different visualization and analysis tasks done. So let's finish up with a quick refresher on sorting and limiting. So once again, sorts change the order in which chart elements are shown. And what you just saw was a descending metric sort. However, there are other types of sorts as well. If it's an attribute, you can sort it alphabetically or reverse alphabetically. And for times, you can sort them chronologically or reverse chronologically. The limit will limit the total number of chart elements, and you can use it to create top-end style charts. One thing to keep in mind, Zoom data will not display data beyond the limit. So if, for example, you're creating a line chart for a year's worth of data, and you notice only the first 3 months are showing up, before investigating your data source or trying to troubleshoot for a bug, make sure your limit isn't set to something less than, let's say, 365 times however many lines you have. Because that's oftentimes something that personally I experience when I notice that my charts aren't rendering fully. It's often that the limit's set too low. Just something to keep in mind. So in this video, we've gone over some basic visualization tasks. We looked at a bar chart. We looked at a line chart. We looked at the different interface elements, how to select metrics and attributes using the metric and attribute pickers. We examined sorting, limiting, and we talked a little bit about the time granularity picker. That's all for now, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.